The flop-eared cowdog. He was the classic Basset Hound. Couldn't smile, but he could frown. He could bark real loud and low and bare his teeth. So if he'd chosen just to stay behind the door to growl and bay, he'd have been a first deterrent to a thief. But he just had to be the dog that he told himself he'd be, since that day he watched that cowdog way out west. From the back seat of the car his wet eyes sparkled up with stars to watch her do what she could do and do it best. She would nip at those cows' heels as she turned smooth as a wheel, left and right until she drove them cattle nuts. So's that 'fore long they'd just give up and corral themselves and shut up, 'cause they'd learned there were no way to escape such mutts. He practiced when he could on the lizards in the woods. His ears would flop as he chased those critters round. And though his legs were truly strong, his ears were so darn long that they'd slip beneath his feet and he'd go down. But he kept on running herd, chasing shadows, chasing birds. No one knew what he was planning. They just thought, "Oh, that silly Bassett's happy. Kinda reminds me of his pappy. Big and short and slow and stupid as a rock." But it weren't a fair comparison, 'cause though it was embarrassing to run on stubs and stumble on your ears, he knew he'd made some progress once he learned that he could play chess with those tiny critters' worries, frights, and fears. Didn't have to move too much, just made lunges. Then he'd crunch down on the ground to make it look like he might charge. So when a ground squirrel dared to look back, this hound would rip his lip back, and the fear would freeze that squirrel as stiff as starch. Now once he'd learned to herd small bugs and small mice across big rugs, he decided he was fit to make a change. So he slipped away on Monday, swearing he'd stay gone till one day he could say he'd herded livestock on the range. Now, it should not be surprising that the people who were driving on the road along the pathway that he picked were both tickled and confused, and sometimes even moved by the way his waddle caused his ears to flip. But you could tell he couldn't tell, and nothing could compel him to believe that he was not up to this task. So he picked himself a pasture with a pin and stalked a heifer who had laid down in the sunshine there to bask. He put his belly to the ground, which ain't too far for a Basset Hound, tried to pin his ears back to look all sneaky sleek. But his short legs splayed out sideways, and his ears, to his great disgrace, draped a curtain across his face through which he peeked. You know, at first it went quite well. The heifer sprung up scared as hell, quite certain that the beast was craving meat. But she soon would come to learn this funny cow dog couldn't even turn without his ear flaps getting tangled in his feet. Now this Basset didn't give up, kept on bouncing like a pup, at first certain that he'd get that heifer pinned. Each time that he fell down, bounced right up like a rodeo clown, trusting effort brings forth victory in the end. But that cow was not impressed with this clown in his barrel chest that scraped the tops off cow pies as he ran. Though his heart beat like a leopard, he was no Australian shepherd, not a heeler, not a collie, not that clan. After herding for an hour, he stood there panting as he glowered at the heifer who weren't scared now in the least. He could bark all that he wanted. She just sashayed by, undaunted, saw him silly as some sheep that just been fleeced. Adding insult to the pain, a barnyard full of eyes was trained upon his failure here to herd and catch his dreams. For 10 hens, 2 cats, and 1 mare had circled in to stare, and the embarrassment just made him want to scream. He sure knew it couldn't be pretty to see a hound dog from the city all droop-eyed, slumped, and drooling on the ground. And he began to get the picture. Why, his mom and pop and sister had warned him smiling is for cow dogs, not for hounds. So he packed away his smile with all his dreams and just turned tail, aimed his droop eyes to the ground and his fat butt home. Sure, he knew he'd suffer jokes from those mice and lizard folks when he showed up with his doggone tail down. But most folks who know life's secrets are mostly in agreement that for every yin there follows soon a yang. And heck if that didn't happen, and it started with a tapping sound that caught the hound dog's ears, and then a clang. Those sounds were followed shortly by a whimper, so our portly pup decided he'd veer off the path to check. He traversed a daylight clearing into woods, light disappearing. It was scary there. Then something grabbed his neck. He spun and jumped and buckled to try to pry away and shuck whatever monster had descended on his back. He couldn't even see his foe, so with no better way to go, he charged a pine tree and hit it with a smack. Well, the whole world started tumbling, and the hound commenced to fumbling for his balance, so he'd have a chance to flee. But when he finally got upright, he was greeted by the sight of a tiny child's face, all lit with glee. Now, what a toddler girl was doing in the woods, he had no clue, and there was not a ma or pa there to be seen. So he thought he'd better stay for a while and let her play whilst he waited for her folks to join the scene. She tugged hard on his ears and rode his rumpy rear and yipped him like a cowgirl yips a bronc. But this hound dog grinned and bared it, 'cause he didn't want to scare it, this little girl, who rode him right into a rock. Well, that day was quite a scorcher, and this 2 hours of torture added to it made him want to run away. Then he thought he'd maybe scare her and chase her right on back to where her frantic family must be searching in dismay. But, of course, that didn't succeed, 'cause clearly Bassets ain't the breed made for rounding up critters with spins and grins. So he turned to head for home, distraught to leave the child alone, 'cause he knew there wasn't no way this wasn't a sin. But then something magic happened. As he walked away all sad and wishing he had never had no dreams at all. 'Cause right when you can't see no clear way, sometimes things just work out sideways. And 'twas then and there good fortune paid a call. See, the toddler, trying to catch him, lunged out toward his tail to snatch it, and the quicker that he walked, the more she'd run. Soon he saw he could outpace her, which meant he didn't have to chase her, and could trot her home while she was chasing fun. Basset's trot, oh yes, it's true, cleared up the toddler's speed +2, and thus he lured her from the forest to the road, where they became one fun parade while giving the dog a new crusade and answering the heartfelt prayers of the child's folks back home. For it didn't take long at all for some passerbys to call to tell the police they'd found a girl child by herself. But we know she wasn't alone. As sure as God sits on his throne, she was guarded by an ear-winged angel elf. Some dogs are made for attacking things, and others made for tracking things, and some dogs just look pretty and sit smart. And the trick that takes them far is knowing who they are, then turning who they are into an art. He thought he had to outrun herds, and not one time did it occur to him he had a different gift another way. He brought a child back for good, but not the way a cap dog would. He did it pulling in, not pushing her away. See, a Basset's like a tractor. Moving fast just ain't a factor. Their stubby legs, big ears, and sad eyes are the lures. They pull you in with a smile concealed, then lean on you so you can feel the weight of being safe and home again.